I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm happy you went there. I was kind of trying to avoid it because I don't want to always come back to Trump, but I couldn't agree with you more. You're absolutely right. Right, America on September 12th, 2001, we're all together. I think it was probably the lowest crime rate day I think in our history. Like nobody was trying to hurt nobody else. Everybody was on the same page. We were mourning, we were healing, we were angry, and we were feeling all those things in unison. And in 2016, when Trump won, was there was half the country who was saying this is an absolute disaster, and the other half of the country was like, finally, we could speak our mind and spew this hatred that Trump spews. And I'm glad you brought it up because I have a take here, and you don't have to stand by it. And anybody listening, understand that this is my take and not John's take. But the question I have for you is, did 9/11 work in the sense that I could easily draw a line from the hatred that we see today, not just for Arab Americans or Muslims or people who are part of the Islamic faith, right? But of also the Hispanic and Latino community, the Black community. I could look at the hatred of everybody that's not white, right? And I don't want to make it a white thing as much as a different thing, right? But I could draw a line from Trump winning the election to that. I could draw a line from 9/11 to Trump winning the election directly. And my question to you becomes, did it work? Because I never felt like an Arab American in this country till 9/11. I never felt different till 9/11. I always just felt like I was a Chicago kid who was part of just this. I grew up in a Black and Hispanic community, and we were just all kind of part of the struggle together. And not until 9/11 did I feel like, oh, I am different, and I'm going to have to deal with this as I get older, and I still have to deal with it as I get older, right? So,
So when you say did it work, though, what do you mean? Like, did it work for who? What is the did it work question? Is what I guess I want to know before I answer that question.
yeah, well, they attacked us, and yes, they killed people, and obviously it worked in that way. But people say, oh, we got stronger and we became together and we helped each other and we became more kind and we were all on the same page. But that's not what ended up happening 20 years later. So the question is, did they destabilize us? Did they cause friction and a break line within the American kind of psyche that, oh, this person might be this or this person might be that? Do you see that direct cross line from 9/11?
Well, I'll give you a another nuanced answer that I first of all that's the first time I heard that question, and so it's very fascinating. But my initial answer is, in a really weird way, some of the stuff that we're dealing with, we were headed towards. Don't forget, this was after
Mm-hmm.
the 2000 election. This was after many of us feel that the presidency was stolen from Al Gore by George Bush. This is after many of us viewed George Bush, as an illegitimate president. Before there was Trump as the illegitimate president, we felt that Bush was the illegitimate president. Don't forget, he did not win the popular vote, and it was
Mm-hmm.
very suspect on how it went. So, if anything, first of all, let's not minimize the trauma, the tragedy, the loss, but in many ways, might it have kind of bought Bush and U.S. some time to sort of try to unite one more time? The reason why the uniting fell apart and over time, I don't think had anything to do with terrorism or Bin Laden. It had more to do with the circumstances before. Don't forget, even in the 2004 speech that Obama gave during the Democratic National Convention, he has that one line. Is like, and we'll count the votes, and he pauses and says, most of the time, right? In 2004, which is 3 years after 2001, John Kerry's campaign, in some ways, a lot of it was about avenging the theft of 2000. So, to the point of your question, if anything, it may have given us one last opportunity to unite. And I think the biggest challenge, and I think it's the biggest problem, and it goes a long way into, while the best thing to happen to George Bush was Donald Trump. I'm sorry. Um, but when I think about how despised he was, how despised Cheney was by many on the left and many in the center, and what they did was, and now we have to move on to Iraq, but is, on the one hand, in one breath, they're saying, "Oh, we're not going to vilifize or demonize our Muslim brothers and sisters," but by the same token, they're going to go ahead and target a Muslim country, Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11, and that was leveraging Islamophobia, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment. That's how they got away with it, right? So I think that I think that Trump, maybe the Republican Party, had always known their base, but they kind of kept them in check. They riled them up. They leveraged those wedge issues, but they also knew they could only go so far. Trump came in and said, "You know what? I'm riling up, but when I get you riled up, I'm not putting you back in that room. I'm letting you run." Right? And I think that's the biggest difference. So, um, I don't think what we're going through right now is the destabilization. I think now, maybe in the foreign policy space, yes, but in the domestic space, no. I don't think in the domestic space. If anything, in the domestic space, I think it gave us an opportunity to, because we did unite, but we did not take that moment and correct things. Maybe had we corrected things, then we wouldn't have Trump. But that's on us, not. And I don't think that's a byproduct of 9/11, in my opinion.
It's interesting. I feel differently, and let me tell you why. Is because I do agree with you that the Republicans are always known for riling up their base, but you know more than I do because I was obviously a little younger. But if I'm not mistaken, it was more around taxes and law and order and say don't know drugs and that stuff. George Bush, when I watched the documentary about the 2000 election, Bush was really hammering away at things that had nothing to do with terrorism and foreign policy and immigration, really. 9/11 hits and they pivot, right? They turn into immigration is bad. We got to stop all the terrorism in the world, and Sharia law can't come here, and this and this and this. And remember the sentiment against Obama wasn't that he was black, right? It was that he was Islamic and he was had a Middle Eastern name and his middle name was Hussein and he was really from the Middle East. It wasn't that he was a black guy from the south side of Chicago. It was like, no, he's they put him with the robe and everything and he was Islamic. So the sentiment against Obama was that. And if you look at that and really where that came from was Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump coming in and saying, remember, he kicked off his campaign saying, we got to stop the terrorism and the people coming over from the border. His first week in office, he institutes a Muslim ban that had nothing to do with anything. It was just pure racial. So that's the draw lineup. And then look at what's happening on there's a reason George Bush mentioned January 6th when he was talking about September 11 was because to me they're tied, right? Is It's frustrating to talk about, John, because I look at America as weaker than it was 20 years ago. And granted, I was a teenager back then. And I probably didn't know, and there was always the racial things. There was always the Breonna Taylors and the George Floyds. That was always happening, and there was always anti-immigration kind of sentiment. Um, but I look at January 6th as one of the weakest moments we've ever had in our country, and I'm not a historian, but to me, that directly is lied against this power grab to everybody against the left. So that's kind of my opinion on it. Is I feel like America is weaker than it was 20 years ago, and that's because of 9/11, and that's probably a really general line.